Hi there, welcome to Miracle Stars, the podcast produced and created by Minjic. Today we are having one of Minjic's most cherished artists, Ellen Grossman, on the show. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great.
Good, me too.
Ellen Grossman is a New York-based American artist. Numerous key galleries in the New York City area, France, and Italy have featured Ellen's work in the past. She never stopped making art after she finished her BFA at Cooper Union in 1974, no matter what the life circumstance was. Ellen is known for her typographic drawings, where she embodies the temporal elements of experiences in ecological drawings that mimic topography. During the pandemic, Ellen started experimenting with animated videos, and one thing led to another, which is included in Minjic's represented artworks, is her latest work. So, Ellen, could you tell us a little bit more about this video art work, One Thing Led to Another?
This particular video, unlike some others that I've done, emerged without too much preconceived notion. It may seem weird and trivial, but what I was thinking about was my kitchen stove. I had years and years and years. When I moved in here in 1972, the stove was already old, white and enamel clean, and I loved the flame because it burned blue and a little bit of orange. So I just started drawing the flame because recently there was a gas leak in the building and they couldn't track it down, and the landlord wisely switched us to electric stoves, which involved a year with no cooking stuff, and finally the electric stove came and I could get rid of the hot plate. I had a hard time adjusting to the electric stove. I was burning food. It's hard to figure out how hot. I was missing the flame and cooking on gas stove. And then I realized it's another fossil fuel, and also getting the cooking gas, they use strip mining for shale. So there's environmental damage when they mine it. Burning the more fossil fuel isn't so great. So I came to accept that the electric is better, especially as we get more and more environmentally friendly electric sources like solar. Contemplating my flame and missing my flame, I was drawing this flame, and then it kind of expanded and expanded, and these other thoughts of the environmental impact came. But then also, I love science. I follow amateur, and thoughts of the early gases that were in the universe, my gas stove. And so I kind of made this leap into the early universe and balls of gas forming into planets because of gravity. So that's where this video went, this animation went.
Wow. But how did this evolve into the stairs and the swivels of those wonderful storytelling?
I'm using a digital app, and I was trying to zoom into the middle of the flame. And as I zoomed in, there was a kind of repeated pattern that, my God, they looked like stairs. So it suggested itself to stairs. And when that happens, other times I erase it. You can blend it out, or, there are various things you can do to erase it. But the stairs were so beautiful that I kept them, and they seemed to be a stairway into this other whole leap into the consciousness of the universe from a little gas flame. Also, I am very fond of stairs, just in general.
I think that's so beautiful, the whole concept of developing one deeper thinking from a very trivial event and very down to earth and so close to our daily life. Actually, you inspire me to think so much about this concept. One thing led to another, and I started to say this so much in my daily life, no matter what kind of context it was. So I noticed
more than I could hope for.
Yeah, it's so strange. And so I noticed that you only started making this animated videos during the pandemic. All of them are abstract. I wonder whether of this abstract animation represent the embodiment of your psychological, mental, spiritual state.
The evolution of making animations was I was entertaining myself while having to wait for subways, mostly with subways. I travel a lot, or traveled before the pandemic, a lot by subway. And there's often a long wait on the platform, and it seems even longer. You're standing on your feet. A kid friend of mine installed on my phone this drawing app. Ultimately, she also installed a stop-motion video app, which came into play later. So I could draw with my finger on the phone while I'm waiting on this platform and still be present in the world. And there are all these colors. And so I was drawing these shapes and bursts, and there are different tools. You can make thin lines and thick lines. The digital app was really fun, and I didn't think doing much with it, except as I drew a picture and then I would save it. That looks pretty good. And then I would change it a little and then save that, and I would save successive changes to the picture. And then when I went to my photo file, along the bottom, you can move to the next picture by scrolling, and they were popping into animation. You know, the changes were, it grew a line, it burst, it grew another color. So I noticed this possibility of animation. When the pandemic came, I thought I would pursue that, and this 8-year-old kid, who I'm very fond of, she's 16 now, had installed several video applications, and one was the best one for this purpose was a stop motion, where you could import pictures from your photo files into the video stop motion app, and you could set it for 24 frames per second, 5 frames per second. I chose 3 frames per second. But I was deeply into each image. Each image was, for me, an artwork, and it was coming from somewhere that was more than just fiddling around or doodles. So I take them seriously. My heart is in them. And some of the videos have been amusing, but all of them are an expression of what I can bring into the world and obviously what the world has brought into me. So it's traveling through my consciousness. So that's spirit.
Wow. So what do you think you want the audience to experience or to receive from this animation?
I actually want to receive from the audience. I don't want to pound my ideas into other people. I want to receive their responses. And with my drawing, such as the one over my head, people see all sorts of things that I didn't intend to put into them, because there's a horizon line and a sense of sky. They're kind of landforms, and which in the case of this one, if you look carefully, the laws of physics are a little bent. It's another reality that where flowing things can have sort of these shapes. So that's where I go with them as I'm drawing them, and I watch them emerge, and it's very exciting to me. And also time-consuming. Last person who looked at this saw horses and animals and haystacks, and I didn't put that in there, intentional. But now that she described that to me, I incorporate it. It forms layers of reality. It's someone else's reality that they see cartoon characters or horses in a field. This woman, had a passion for traveling and horses in a field. So it becomes a collaboration once it's out in the world. I don't think that's unusual for artworks to take that on. I have heard other artists who will then insist in the face of that, no, I didn't put any, horses in there. But actually, I'm very interested in seeing what they see and then layering it onto what my intention was, and having, if more than one person sees things. I had another one where people saw shawls and people saw mountains and people saw Roman helmets, all in the same thing. And trying to hold all that in flickering through it is like this expanded thing, so I get a glimpse into other people's perceptions.
In that case, I should definitely try to collect people's opinion then. And it reminds me of how when we see clouds, we all have different interpretation. So it's like very natural with natural forms.
I think it's very beautiful that we bring that to it. I have a strong interest in cave paintings, and sometimes the people who made those images of animals and stuff would use a bulge in the rock, and that would be the animal's body. They'd sort of do that cloud thing. They'd see something in the rock, and then they'd paint it in. It's like just a really basic impulse for human perceptions and imaginations. Yeah. So one thing leads to another. It hooks back into this particular title for this video.
It's almost like if we can't ever have the same dream altogether, we all will experience it in a different way. So you made these animations during the pandemic. Could you tell us a little bit more about your pandemic experience? And I also know that you got COVID, and how was the work in progress along that?
At first, the confinement is, as the whole world knows, was psychologically pretty rough. It's labor intensive, and my drawing is labor intensive, and that's very useful in isolation, is having something that you're really engaged in. A neighbor was buying me food, and that wasn't working really well. I asked him for cheese, and he wanted to be generous, and I had enough cheese for months. So I started going out fully masked and very cautiously early in the day before stores got crowded, and theoretically the air in the store would be fresh. And I got away with that for a year. I guess I got careless or whatever. At some point I caught COVID, but most of I did 7, 8, 9. I did many of the animations that I've released before I got COVID, and when I got COVID, it sent me back. A friend of mine drove in from New Jersey with food. I mean, it was, but I didn't need hospitalization. Yay! I just felt like unbelievably heavy headache for 8 days. Anyway, I picked up after that. Using the phone to draw, I could lie down even when I was post-COVID exhausted, and actually do a lot of work while resting. I mean, I recovered from the worst of COVID, and then I had the exhaustion that some people have. So I was able to keep making animations even when I wasn't able to sit at a desk or a table to draw. And that's my relationship. They say that years ago they had these people who got into isolation tanks and their imaginations went wild. I think the animations came out of, I wasn't in a sensory deprivation tank, but to some extent it is.
Yeah. Wow, you are so dedicated that you just always want to do it.
Thank you. And sometimes when I'm doing artwork, I feel I'm just avoiding housework.
I am the opposite sometimes. Sometimes when I'm avoiding work, I would clean the house. So how about this one thing led to another animation? What was the life situation during the time you made that? And how long did you spend on this?
I believe I sent you a sample that was very different than what it turned out to be. And at one time it became mountains emerged. You can try and imagine that, out of the middle of where the stairs later emerged. The mountains turned into a person, and then there were these red leafy things on the edge, and they started moving around the mountains, and it became somebody's back and an embrace. And it was someone very close to me who had died. It became his back, and I couldn't continue on with that, both out of grief and also, for the moment, it's a very private experience. I may be able to release that at some point, but this embrace, this hug, was just too powerful to continue with. So I backtracked, and then the stairs emerged, and they led me into the universe, which has something to do with our mortality. So this one took a lot longer. Grief is an important human experience.
You have so many different roles in life, and you are also a mother. And did this have any impact on any of your art?
I think it's a core issue. I hope it's translated into a universal issue. I became a single mother early on in the lives of my children. That's another story that not easy to share. I had my first kid when I was 19. I was pregnant at 18, so I was just barely 19. And I had dropped out of college. So I didn't finish my years at Cooper Union Art School until my son was 9 and my daughter was 5. So I was juggling work, going to school, and taking care of the kids. And it was not easy, and I wasn't making a great deal of money, which makes life a lot harder too. So I was dealing with, man, this is hard. Also trying to reconcile and not become resentful because I had chosen my life. And the artwork somehow became a lot of sculpture, and the drawings I did were supportive of the sculpture. They weren't intended to be shown. Then were so exciting that we did show them. But the sculpture, which was my primary identity, was about things being inside of an environment, these wavy forms that kind of represented beings, me, my kids, whatever, being kind of engulfed in the environment. You could read the environment as this network of enmeshed, trapped, or because they were kind of wavy, flying forms, you could see it as just the sky or the air or water, and it was supporting, even if you're flying, you're still supported by air currents and air. And being a level of freedom and connection of the world supports you, and it forms your identity. Connected to all the problems you have or all the support you have. I had a great deal of support. Friends came through with job offers and babysitting and housing. At some point, we didn't have a place to live, and then a friend was dating a landlord. I mean, all sorts of positive support as well as the struggle. So I saw it as the gorgeousness of being alive, of reconciling the difficulties you're having with the kind of help and also the struggle that you form your personality by working through the difficulties. The artwork really had a lot to do with it, although in abstract forms. But I think many artists deal with these kind of tensions in their work. Another heavy subject.
Yes. I wasn't sure if I should ask your opinion about the role the abortion rights were fighting against.
I am heartbroken that people don't have a choice. Years and years and years later, I became pregnant unexpectedly and did take some herbal. And I think that time I might have chosen abortion because it would have been disastrous to add another child to trying to support the two. I believe that we have the right to choose, and because the damage from my two existing children would have been very, very hard on us. And often that's why people seek abortion. They just can't cope with another.
Were you in your teen when you had your son?
I was 18 and pregnant, and then I had just turned 19. I was overjoyed with the baby and was not quite mature enough, but I did take good care of him. Yeah, hindsight, but he was very much welcomed into my world, and he was a great joy.
Sorry, so crying. You're saying that sculpture is your main identity as an artist and the main form.
That has changed, but it was the core of what I set out to do in the world. I take the animation and the drawings. Now I'm doing also, I paint and then draw over the paint. And I take all it's serious stuff to me. I'm an artist as opposed to just a sculptor.
I was really curious about how you sense differently internally when you express yourself or in different art forms.
Well, the drawings were in support of the sculpture. They were not meant to be seen by other people, and they were a way to increase my sensitivity to surface, both the surface that my hands were experiencing by drawing it, and then the illusionary surface, which related to the surface of the sculpture at that time. Were also representation of flowing water or air currents, so that I was expressing the flow. You can see it in what's behind me. All that flow, it resembles water. It also resembles mountain flow. It turns out that if you speed it up, mountains grow and surge and recede and through erosion and through geologic processes. So there's flow there as well. So the drawings were, I hadn't meant to show them to anyone, but someone came to visit the studio and said, "You gotta show these." I wasn't ashamed of them. I just hadn't conceived of them as being something I was putting out as my expression. But then I realized, yeah, they go there. And then the discovery of color had to do purely with, I had these younger studio mates who were painters, and I hadn't used color. I was making a lot of monochromatic stuff. Even the drawings I did on blue paper, that was color, but it was a monochromatic thing, and then these painters were using color, and I just got excited. So it was a leap. At that point, I started making sculpture and wall reliefs where I spray painted the surfaces. Color was very exciting, so it was a big leap, and it was, a different kind of sensory stimulation. And then the discovery of animation was totally accidental, having to do with boredom while waiting train, and then the discovery that they animated. And the girl's name is Lillian, she had installed these apps on my phone, several different drawing apps, and I found my way to a favorite, and several different stop motion and animation, video apps, and found my favorite. But she had installed all this stuff, and that was just serendipity that I had these tools. I was engaged, but I wasn't intending to make animation. There are compromises in it because I'm using 3 frames per second, so the animations are very jumpy. And it has a little bit of connection to a lot of what I'm talking about is compromised. Being a mother and being an artist, obviously you can't do it all well. I think my kids are proud of me and glad that I'm an artist, but there were tensions and pulls on my time, and I did used to bring the kids to the neighborhood cellar where I had to set up a studio, and I'd bring the kids over there and they'd play with tools and stuff. So I tried to integrate it, but so this compromise of doing 3 frames per second, because I didn't want to spend a year on a minute of animation making, I think there's 24 frames per second multiplied by 60. It's a lot of drawings. Yeah. Anyway, I think that the name of my life is compromise, and I honor it. I think that it's a human condition. There are people who compromise less, but I think there's also trade-offs when you do that.
Yeah, it's just always moving when I hear your life stories. And
oh, don't be sorry. You may want to cut this out of the if you like.
No, I'm not going to cut this out.
I feel so strongly about our friendship and our connection is part of why this is working. Yeah.
So at last, really hope to hear more about your stories and your connection with New York. You were born there and you stayed there. And what is the story? Your personal history is the history of New York.
From the age of 5 till the age of 18, I was in a suburban setting. It was where I was largely a lot of formative years. But when I came back to the city, I don't want to give New York a bad name, but there's a certain grubbiness about the housing that I've acquired, and the years when I was a tiny girl that felt really comfortable. I like the sense of lived-in spaces and the sense of echoes and reverberations of humanity having been there, which means not pristine spaces. And there's a lot of the city. The city keeps evolving, and new buildings are sprouting all around us, which are pristine. But then you get out on the street, and there's all that life. There's all this history, and here, and it's not always neat and clean, but it is very human. So my relation to New York has to do with a certain taste for the chaos, the noise, the inconveniences, and then the resources. Museums and music, plays, people. I'm kind of an odd person in finding people. And there's a tolerance because of the diversity. There's a tolerance for oddness that I worked in the suburbs from 95 to 2002. People would ask why I was commuting from the city, and I saw that I really preferred commuting from the city.
You saw Bob Dylan before he got famous.
Yes, I did. Actually, on Staten Island in a high school gymnasium. He played a job there. But I was coming in from the suburbs into the city, and then a friend of mine said, Bob Dylan's going to be it. We were already excited about Bob Dylan. I didn't meet Bob Dylan, but I saw him early in performance.
You met Jay-Z, though.
I did meet JC. Being well known for being clueless is and then amused by my cluelessness. Probably the most charming 90 seconds of my life were caught on video. And that was, I really liked JC without knowing he was famous. He really had a magnetic charm.
Oh, that's a very beautiful whole life journey.
I'm approaching 77 years of age, and I'm still excited to be alive.
Yeah,
and what next? What next?
It's so inspiring when you always tell me that you still feel you're 35.
Oh yeah, inner. I mean,
motivational.
Yeah, emotionally, and my concept of myself is 35, and of course, the reality of looking at right now. I'm looking at a video of myself after COVID. Fatigue was. I don't know if it was qualified as long COVID, but the fatigue was unbelievable. Man, is this going to stay this way? Am I going to jump into old age? But I'm pretty energetic now.
You're always working. I'm going to follow suit.
Yeah, I feel a kinship with the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. You are one of my biggest influence.
Honored.
That's true, with my watercolor. Okay, thank you so much for the interview today.
Thank you. This was a real pleasure to dive deep into where I came from and where I'm going. It crystallized a lot for me to speak of these things.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Hope to see you in person very soon.
Okay.